Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to the second installment in my Kicking It Old School series, a series with a title that sounds like it's definitely made up by somebody who's near middle age, who definitely does not know what is cool these days. But it's a series where I try to take mechanics or elements from the rule sets for modern D&D and kind of put it in a historical context of how different things were with different editions, older editions. It's primarily aimed at individuals who are newer to, say, 5th edition D&D or maybe even 3rd edition D&D in some cases, where that's their starting point, taking systems that are familiar to them from those versions and kind of putting it, like I said, in that historical context. The first video that I did was looking at the basic expert version of a Dragon's Breath weapon, and today we're going to take a look at some earlier versions of a rogue's, or in the older D&D systems, the thief's most powerful ability, the sneak attack, or the backstab as it used to be called. For modern context, sneak attack is a rogue's ability where if they attack somebody and the target of the attack has one of your allies adjacent to them or within 5 feet of them, if you hit, you just deal an extra amount of damage, starting at an extra d6, all the way going up to an extra 10d6 when the character reaches, I think it's like 19th or 20th level. Now, sneak attack in modern D&D, especially 5th edition, is super easy to pull off, and something that, if you're playing a rogue, you're pretty much guaranteed to be getting that off more or less every round, unless things are really going poorly. But it used to be a lot more difficult to pull off for really not much of a game. So we're going to start with, again, basic expert. It was the same way in 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as well. So we're just going to set this one off to the side for a second here. And we're going to find the Thief table here in... Oh, a little too far. Okay, so we've got the Thief class from the Rule Cyclopedia. Now, the Rule Cyclopedia is based off of the BECMI version of Dungeons & Dragons, which is a revision to the basic expert rules. It's sort of a whole complicated thing. We're not going to get into that here in this video, but this is the Rule Cyclopedia, which if you're interested in older versions of D&D, you can actually get this off of DriveThruRPG or DM's Guild, which is where I actually got this copy. This is my DriveThruRPG version. But we're going to take a look at the Thief's abilities here. Particularly, we want to take a look at backstabbing. So we're going to zoom in on this one. So here we have a backstabbing. It says, if a thief can sneak up on a victim completely unnoticed, the thief may backstab. If he's using a one-handed melee weapon, he may strike at a particularly vulnerable points on the target's body. Though the ability is called backstabbing, the weapon doesn't have to be a stabbing weapon. The thief can use the ability with a club, for example. When backstabbing, the thief gains a bonus of +4 on the attack roll. If the target hits, the damage done is twice the normal roll. So you roll the damage and then multiply the result by 2. Then add any pertinent modifiers. So this was, again, a little bit more difficult to pull off because the target had to be completely unaware of you, which, generally speaking, once you get into combat, is a lot harder to pull off. It further goes on to say, if the intended target or the intended victim sees, hears, or is warned of the thief's approach, the thief's attack is not a backstab. It is an ordinary attack doing the damage appropriate for the weapon used. When no battle's in progress, a backstab attempt may require a move silently ability check. The DM will make all necessary decisions on the matter. So back in the day, when combat broke out, it was a lot more difficult to actually pull this off. And generally, you were really only likely to get this off once in a combat situation, because once the thief is sort of known and the combatants are sort of doing their thing, in the heat of the battle, it's really easy for enemies to sort of shout locations. If somebody's sneaking up on somebody in particular, they'll say, behind you, or something along those lines. So it was a very difficult ability to pull off. Generally, it required the thief being hidden at the start of combat, or relying on something like an item that grants them invisibility if they were multi-classed, which in basic D&D you didn't quite have multi-classing. But if you had a potion or a cloak of invisibility that you could use, that might allow you to sneak up on your target, but it's still something that is much more limited. And doing twice the damage, rolling twice, like rolling and then multiplying the die result by 2, and then adding any extras for high strength or magical pluses. It's kind of an underwhelming ability. It's really good at lower levels when you're taking on like single hit dice creatures where a backstab is absolutely lethal. But once you start talking about some tougher, creatures with multiple hit die, this ability just wasn't really the best. It wasn't the most practical. When I was running a first edition AD&D campaign, I remember being very generous with letting the player who was playing a thief get his backstab opportunities off. Because another thing about these earlier versions is that the different classes attacked with different bonuses or different, I guess you could say, proficiency levels that they would attack at. It's not like in modern D&D where if you're proficient with something, you're always adding the same bonus based on your level, regardless of what class you are. Back then, thieves had the second worst attack progression in the game. I guess there's only 3. So you had the really bad one that wizards had, then you had the middle of the road one, and then you had what warriors would have. So rogues had a pretty poor attack bonus. They kind of needed the +4, and it was a very difficult ability to get off, again, for only ×2 damage. Now that wouldn't necessarily stay that way, because when we got to 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, there was a modification made to the Thief's backstab. So we're just going to get the Thief class here in the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. And as you can see, the Thief's backstab ability is now level dependent on how much extra damage, what the multiplier will be. The problem is that a lot of the same restrictions and same difficulties that the thief would have to deal with apply here. So if the target's aware of you in any way, shape, or form, either it sees you, hears you, or is warned by one of their allies that you're trying to sneak up on them, it means that you don't get the backstab off. But if you are able to get it, at higher levels, you can actually increase your multiplier. So like I said, this was something that 2nd edition did. For levels 1 through 4, you're still doing the ×2 multiplier, but at levels 5 through 8, you're doing ×3. At levels 9 through 12, it's ×4. And then 13th level or higher, you're doing ×5. Now, hit dice numbers didn't get as out of control as they are in, say, modern D&D. In fact, most character classes stopped gaining hit dice and stopped rolling for hit points around 9th or 10th level. So being able to do up to ×5 is actually a lot better. It actually makes the backstab a lot more worth trying in 2nd edition at those higher levels. Because like I said, with the older versions, it was only ever ×2, and once you start getting past creatures with, more than 2 hit dice, for example, it makes it's still a decent amount of damage for a singular attack, but it's just never going to be as powerful as, say, getting multiple attacks that, a fighter might have, for example. So it was a much more difficult ability to pull off, and until 1989, so from like 74 to 89, the damage was just multiplied by 2, and that was the damage on the die result, not the damage of the die plus all of your modifiers, then multiplied by 2. So again, a lot different from today's version where the thief can simply roll a handful of bonus d6, and the only criteria that you need is one of your allies has to be within 5 feet of the target. Sneak attack, back in the day, or backstab as it used to be called, was a very difficult ability to pull off, and until you got into higher levels in 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, it wasn't really all that great of an ability for all the work that you had to put into it. But anyway, that was, like I said, just a quick look at the evolution, you could say, of the backstab ability, or sort of the precursor to what we have for the modern day sneak attack. Let me know in the comments below, what are your guys' earliest memories of using a backstab or sneak attack like ability when you were first getting into Dungeons and Dragons? Were you one of the individuals who did the old school version and jumped through a ton of hoops to do pretty crappy damage overall? Or are you someone who started with the more modern versions where it's a lot easier to pull off and all that you need is somebody that's either within 5 feet of the target or just diametrically opposed to you, flanking the target? Let me know that in the comments below. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it was a little bit informative. If you have any suggestions for modern mechanics that you might want to see, if there were earlier versions or how it may have evolved, even if it's not as in-depth as like my Through the Ages series, let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for ideas, and generally speaking, you guys tend to have better ideas than I do. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.